In the history of the world, few people have changed nations without using violence. Mahatma Gandhi was one of these extraordinary people. He was a small, thin man who wore simple white clothes and carried only a walking stick. But this humble man led India to independence from the British Empire, using only the power of truth and nonviolence. Gandhi showed the world that the strongest weapon is not a gun or a bomb, but the courage to stand up for what is right without hurting others. He taught millions of people that real strength comes from controlling our anger and responding to hatred with love. His methods of peaceful resistance inspired leaders around the world, including Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela. Gandhi's life was not easy. He faced many challenges and made many personal sacrifices for his beliefs. He spent years in prison, went on dangerous fasts, and gave up many comforts that other people enjoyed. But he never gave up his dream of a free India, where all people could live together in peace and equality. Today, people all over the world remember Gandhi as the father of the nation in India, and as a symbol of peace and nonviolence everywhere. His ideas about truth, justice, and peaceful resistance continue to inspire people who are fighting for freedom and human rights. His life teaches us that one person with strong beliefs and determination can change the world. If you want to learn more inspiring stories about people who changed history, please subscribe to our channel. We have many more amazing biographies waiting for you to discover. Childhood in Gujarat. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born on October 2, 1869, in Porbandar, a small coastal town in the state of Gujarat in western India. His father, Karamchand Gandhi, was the chief minister of Porbandar, which meant he helped govern the town. His mother, Putli Bai, was a deeply religious woman who spent much time praying and helping poor people in their community. Gandhi's family belonged to the merchant class, known as Bania in Indian society. They were not very wealthy, but they were respected in their community. The Gandhi family followed the Jain religion, which teaches that all living things are sacred and that people should never harm any creature. This early exposure to the idea of nonviolence would later become the foundation of Gandhi's philosophy. As a child, Gandhi was shy and quiet. He was afraid of the dark and often slept with a light on. He was also afraid of thieves, ghosts, and snakes. His friends sometimes made fun of him because he was not brave like other boys his age. But his mother taught him that courage was not about being fearless, but about doing the right thing even when you are afraid. Gandhi's mother had a powerful influence on his character. She taught him the importance of truthfulness, compassion, and self-discipline. She often fasted, which means she stopped eating for religious reasons. And young Gandhi learned from her example that sometimes people must make sacrifices for their beliefs. These lessons from his mother stayed with him throughout his life. When Gandhi was 7 years old, his family moved to Rajkot, another town in Gujarat, where his father got a new job. In Rajkot, Gandhi went to a local school where he learned to read and write in Gujarati, his native language. He was an average student who was more interested in playing and exploring than in studying. He loved to go for long walks in the countryside and to observe the plants and animals around him. At school, Gandhi was honest to a fault. Once, during an inspection by a school official, the teacher told the students to copy answers from each other so the school would look good. But Gandhi refused to cheat, even when his teacher tried to make him do it. This early incident showed his commitment to truth, even when it was difficult or inconvenient. When Gandhi was 13 years old, his parents arranged for him to marry Kasturba Makhanji, a girl who was also 13. Child marriage was common in India at that time, but Gandhi later said he regretted marrying so young. Kasturba, who was called Castor, became his lifelong companion and supporter. She was strong-willed and independent, and she often challenged Gandhi's ideas, which helped him grow as a person. As a teenager, Gandhi went through a period of rebellion. He began to question some of the traditions and beliefs of his family and community. He secretly ate meat, even though his family were vegetarians, and he experimented with smoking cigarettes. He also stole small amounts of money to buy cigarettes, which made him feel terrible guilt. These experiences taught him about the importance of self-control and honesty. When Gandhi was 16, his father became very ill. Gandhi spent many hours caring for his father, bringing him medicine and trying to make him comfortable. One night, Gandhi left his father's bedside to spend time with his wife. While he was away, his father died. Gandhi felt terrible guilt about not being with his father when he died. And this experience taught him about the importance of duty and service to others. After his father's death, Gandhi finished his studies at the local high school. He was not a brilliant student, but he worked hard and passed his examinations. His family wanted him to become a lawyer, which was considered a prestigious profession. However, to become a lawyer in India at that time, he needed to study in England, which seemed like an impossible dream for a young man from a modest family in Gujarat. Journey to England and early struggles. In 1888, when Gandhi was 18 years old, he made a decision that would change his life forever. Despite his family's limited money and his own fears about traveling to a foreign country, he decided to go to London to study law. This was a brave decision because very few Indians had traveled to England at that time, and the journey was expensive and dangerous. Gandhi's mother was worried about sending her son to England. She had heard that young Indian men who went to England often forgot their values and adopted Western ways that went against their religious beliefs. She made Gandhi promise that he would not eat meat, drink alcohol, or touch women while he was away. Gandhi gladly made these promises because he wanted to honor his mother's wishes. The journey to England took nearly a month by ship. Gandhi had never been away from home before, and he felt lonely and homesick during the long voyage. When he arrived in London, He was overwhelmed by the size and noise of the city. Everything was different from what he knew in India: the language, the food, the clothes, the weather, and the customs of the people. At first, Gandhi tried very hard to become an English gentleman. He bought expensive clothes, took dancing lessons, and tried to learn proper English manners. He spent a lot of money on these things, but he soon realized that he was trying to be someone he was not. He decided to stop trying to imitate English people and instead focus on his studies and his own personal development. One of Gandhi's biggest challenges in London was finding food he could eat. He had promised his mother he would not eat meat, but most English food contained meat. He often went hungry because he could not find restaurants that served vegetarian food. Eventually, he discovered a vegetarian restaurant in London, and through this, he met other people who chose not to eat meat for moral reasons. This experience introduced Gandhi to new ideas about diet, health, and ethics. He began to read books about vegetarianism and learned that many intelligent people in England chose not to eat meat because they believed it was wrong to kill animals for food. This confirmed his own beliefs and made him proud of his Indian traditions rather than ashamed of them. Gandhi also began to read religious books from different traditions. He read the Bible, the Quran, and texts from Buddhism and Hinduism. He was particularly influenced by the Bhagavad Gita, a sacred Hindu text that teaches about duty, service, and the importance of acting without expecting rewards. These readings helped him develop a deeper understanding of spirituality and morality. In 1891, after 3 years of study, Gandhi passed his law examinations and became a barrister, which is a type of lawyer in the British legal system. He was now qualified to practice law, but he was still a young and inexperienced man who was not confident about his abilities. He returned to India, hoping to start a successful law practice and support his growing family. Back in India, Gandhi struggled to establish himself as a lawyer. He was extremely nervous when speaking in court and often felt too scared to ask witnesses questions. In his first case, he was so nervous that he could not speak at all and had to ask another lawyer to take over for him. He began to wonder if he had made the right choice in becoming a lawyer. Gandhi's difficulties in establishing his law practice in India led to a life-changing opportunity. In 1893, a company with business interests in South Africa offered him a job representing them in a legal case. The job would require him to live in South Africa for at least a year, and the salary was much better than what he could earn in India. Despite his nervousness about traveling to another foreign country, Gandhi accepted the offer. This decision to go to South Africa would transform Gandhi from a shy, struggling lawyer into one of the world's greatest leaders. In South Africa, he would discover his calling as a fighter for justice and equality, and he would develop the methods of nonviolent resistance that would later help India gain independence. Awakening in South Africa. When Gandhi arrived in South Africa in 1893, He was shocked by the discrimination he faced as an Indian person. At that time, South Africa was controlled by white people who had created laws that treated Indians and black Africans as second-class citizens. Indians could not vote, had to pay special taxes, and were not allowed to live in certain areas or work in certain jobs. Gandhi's first direct experience with racial discrimination came during his train journey from Durban to Pretoria for his legal work. Even though he had a first-class ticket, the train officials ordered him to move to the third-class section because he was Indian. When Gandhi refused to move, saying he had paid for a first-class ticket, he was thrown off the train at a small station called Pietermaritzburg. Gandhi spent that cold night in the waiting room of the train station, shivering and thinking about what had happened to him. He had been treated unfairly simply because of the color of his skin. This experience made him realize that all Indians in South Africa faced similar discrimination every day. He decided that he could not ignore this injustice and that he must do something to fight against it. This incident on the train is often considered the moment when Gandhi's transformation from a private person to a public leader began. He later said that this experience taught him that it was his duty to fight discrimination, not just for himself, but for all people who were treated unfairly because of their race or religion. After completing his legal work in Pretoria, Gandhi decided to stay in South Africa to fight for the rights of the Indian community. He organized meetings where Indians could discuss their problems and plan ways to resist unfair laws. He also started a newspaper called Indian Opinion to inform people about discrimination and to encourage them to stand up for their rights. Gandhi developed his philosophy and methods of resistance while working in South Africa. He called his approach satyagraha, which means holding firmly to truth in Sanskrit. Satyagraha was based on the idea that people should resist unjust laws through nonviolent means, such as refusing to obey bad laws, organizing boycotts, and accepting punishment without fighting back. The first major campaign Gandhi organized in South Africa was against a law that required all Indians to carry special passes and pay a tax that other people did not have to pay. Gandhi encouraged Indians to burn their passes in public and to refuse to pay the unfair tax. Many people followed his leadership, even though they knew they would be arrested and sent to prison. Gandhi himself was arrested several times during these campaigns. He spent many months in prison, where he was treated badly and given poor food and uncomfortable sleeping conditions. But he never complained about his treatment, and he used his time in prison to read, think, and develop his ideas about justice and nonviolence. During his 21 years in South Africa, Gandhi learned important lessons about leadership and social change. He discovered that real change happens slowly and requires great patience and persistence. He also learned that leaders must be willing to make personal sacrifices and to suffer for their beliefs if they want others to follow them. Gandhi's work in South Africa was not always successful, and he faced criticism from both the government and some members of the Indian community. Some people thought his methods were too slow and wanted him to use more aggressive tactics. Others thought he was asking for too much and should accept the discrimination quietly. But Gandhi remained committed to his belief that truth and nonviolence were the most powerful weapons for social change. One of Gandhi's most important achievements in South Africa was the way he brought together Indians from different regions, religions, and social classes. India was a very diverse country with many different languages, customs, and beliefs, and Indians in South Africa often did not work together. Gandhi helped them see that they shared common problems and that they could be stronger if they united to fight discrimination. Gandhi also began to develop his ideas about simple living during his time in South Africa. He started to believe that people should own only what they really need and should not pursue wealth or luxury. He established a community called Phoenix Farm, where he and his followers lived simply, grew their own food, and shared their possessions. This experiment in communal living influenced his later ideas about economic and social justice. Return to India and early political work. In 1915, after spending 21 years in South Africa, Gandhi returned to India as a respected leader, with a reputation for fighting injustice through non-violent means. India at that time was still a colony of the British Empire, and many Indians were growing tired of being ruled by a foreign power. They wanted independence, but they disagreed about the best way to achieve it. When Gandhi first returned to India, he spent a year traveling around the country to understand the problems facing ordinary Indian people. He was shocked by the poverty he saw in villages and cities. Millions of Indians did not have enough food, clean water, or basic health care. Many could not read or write, and they worked in terrible conditions for very low wages. Gandhi also observed that Indian society was divided by the caste system, which put people into different social groups based on the families they were born into. People from lower castes faced discrimination and were often treated as untouchable by people from higher castes. Gandhi believed that this system was unjust and that all people should be treated with equal dignity and respect. Gandhi's first major campaign in India was in support of indigo farmers in the Champaran district of Bihar. These farmers were forced by British landowners to grow indigo, a plant used to make blue dye, instead of food crops. The farmers received very little money for their indigo and often did not have enough food for their families. When Gandhi arrived in Champaran to investigate, the local British officials ordered him to leave the area. Gandhi refused to leave and was arrested. However, the arrest brought so much attention to the farmers' problems that the British government was forced to investigate the situation. Eventually, the unfair system was changed, and the farmers were allowed to grow food crops and received better treatment from the landowners. This success made Gandhi famous throughout India and showed people that his methods could work against British rule. Gandhi's next major campaign was in support of textile workers in Ahmedabad, who were demanding better wages and working conditions. Gandhi advised the workers to go on strike, but he told them they must remain peaceful and not damage any property or hurt anyone. He also went on a fast, refusing to eat until the dispute was resolved. His fast put pressure on the factory owners to negotiate with the workers, and eventually, an agreement was reached that improved the workers' conditions. These early campaigns established Gandhi as a leader who cared about the problems of ordinary people and who was willing to suffer personally for their causes. His methods of nonviolent resistance, including strikes, boycotts, and fasting, proved effective in bringing about change without violence. In 1919, the British government passed the Rowlatt Act, which gave the police power to arrest and imprison Indians without trial if they were suspected of terrorism or sedition. Gandhi and other Indian leaders saw this as a serious attack on civil liberties and decided to organize nationwide protests against the law. Gandhi called for a hartal, which means a day when all businesses and schools would close, and people would pray and fast to show their opposition to the unjust law. The hartal was observed throughout India, with millions of people participating peacefully. However, in some places, the protests turned violent and several people were killed. The violence deeply troubled Gandhi, who had always insisted that resistance must be completely non-violent. He called off the campaign and went on a fast to show his regret about the violence that had occurred. He said that he had made a Himalayan mistake by launching a campaign before making sure that all participants understood and accepted the principle of nonviolence. This experience taught Gandhi an important lesson about leadership and social movements. He realized that it was not enough to organize protests. He also had to educate people about the principles behind the movement and ensure that they were committed to nonviolent methods. This led him to place greater emphasis on personal transformation and moral education as essential parts of political action. The Salt March and mass civil disobedience. By the 1920s, Gandhi had become the most important leader of the Indian independence movement. He transformed the Indian National Congress, the main political party fighting for independence, from an organization of educated elites into a mass movement that included people from all parts of Indian society. Gandhi introduced several innovations to the independence movement that made it more effective and more inclusive. He conducted meetings in local languages rather than English, so that ordinary people could understand what was being discussed. He encouraged women to participate in political activities, which was revolutionary in a society where women traditionally stayed at home. He also reached out to people from lower castes and tried to break down the barriers that divided Indian society. One of Gandhi's most important contributions was his emphasis on Swadeshi, which means using Indian-made products instead of imported goods, especially those made in Britain. He encouraged Indians to spin their own cloth and to wear simple white clothes made from Indian cotton, instead of buying expensive foreign cloth. Gandhi himself learned to spin cotton and spent time each day using a spinning wheel, which became a symbol of the independence movement. The spinning wheel represented several of Gandhi's key ideas. It showed that Indians could be self-sufficient and did not need to depend on British goods. It provided a way for poor people to earn money by spinning cloth at home. It also represented the dignity of manual labor and the importance of economic independence as a foundation for political independence. In 1930, Gandhi decided to launch his most famous campaign against British rule. The British government had a monopoly on salt production in India, which meant that Indians were not allowed to make their own salt and had to buy it from the government at high prices with heavy taxes. This affected every Indian family because salt was essential for preserving food and maintaining health, especially in India's hot climate. Gandhi announced that he would march from his ashram in Ahmedabad to the coastal village of Dandi, a distance of about 240 miles, where he would make salt from seawater in violation of British law. This action would be a symbolic challenge to British authority and would demonstrate that Indians had the right to produce their own salt. The Salt March began on March 12, 1930, with Gandhi and 78 of his followers setting out on foot for the coast. Gandhi was 60 years old at the time, but he walked steadily for 24 days, covering about 10 miles each day. As the march progressed, thousands of people joined the procession, and millions more watched and cheered from the sides of the road. The march received tremendous attention from newspapers around the world, and people everywhere learned about Gandhi's non-violent challenge to British rule. When Gandhi finally reached Dandi on April 6, 1930, he picked up a handful of salt from the beach and declared that he was breaking the British salt law. This simple action sparked a nationwide campaign of civil disobedience. All across India, people began making salt illegally, refusing to pay taxes and boycotting British goods. Hundreds of thousands of Indians were arrested, including Gandhi himself. The jails became so crowded that the British authorities did not have enough space for all the protesters. The campaign demonstrated the power of ordinary people working together for a common cause. The Salt March and the civil disobedience campaign that followed marked a turning point in India's struggle for independence. For the first time, the independence movement had truly become a mass movement that included people from all regions, religions, and social classes. The campaign also brought international attention to India's cause and put pressure on the British government to negotiate with Indian leaders. Although the immediate results of the Salt March were limited, it had profound long-term effects. It showed Indians that they had the power to challenge British rule through their own actions. and it demonstrated to the world that the Indian independence movement was led by people committed to nonviolent principles. The march also established Gandhi as an international symbol of peaceful resistance to injustice. World War II and the Quit India movement. When World War II began in 1939, the British government declared that India was at war with Germany without consulting any Indian leaders. This decision angered many Indians, who felt that they should have been asked for their opinion before being committed to a war that would require significant sacrifices from the Indian people. Gandhi and other Indian leaders were opposed to fascism and sympathized with the countries fighting against Nazi Germany. However, they argued that India could not fight for freedom and democracy in other countries, while it was still denied freedom and democracy at home. They demanded that Britain grant India immediate independence in exchange for Indian support in the war. The British government was not willing to grant immediate independence, but offered to give India self-government after the war ended. Indian leaders rejected this offer because they did not trust British promises, and because they believed that India had the right to determine its own future immediately, not at some uncertain time in the future. In 1942, Gandhi and the Indian National Congress launched the Quit India movement, demanding that the British leave India immediately. Gandhi gave a powerful speech in which he told the Indian people to do or die in their struggle for freedom. He called on every Indian to become a freedom fighter and to use nonviolent resistance to make British rule impossible to continue. The British government responded to the Quit India movement by arresting Gandhi and thousands of other Indian leaders within hours of the campaign's launch. Gandhi was imprisoned in the Aga Khan Palace near Pune, where he would spend the next 2 years under house arrest. Despite the arrest of their leaders, millions of Indians participated in protests, strikes, and acts of civil disobedience. The Quit India movement saw some of the most widespread resistance to British rule in Indian history. Students left their schools, workers went on strike, and government officials resigned from their jobs. In some areas, protesters destroyed railway lines, telegraph wires, and government buildings. Although Gandhi had called for non-violent resistance, the movement included some violent actions, which troubled him greatly. While Gandhi was in prison, tragedy struck his personal life. His secretary and lifelong friend Mahadev Desai died of a heart attack in prison. Then in 1944, Gandhi's wife Kasturba, who had been imprisoned with him, became seriously ill and died in his arms. These personal losses were devastating for Gandhi, who had depended on both of these people for support and companionship throughout his political career. Gandhi's imprisonment during World War II lasted for nearly 2 years, and his health suffered greatly during this time. He went on several fasts to protest his treatment and to draw attention to India's cause. These fasts worried people around the world, who feared that Gandhi might die in prison. The international pressure eventually contributed to his release in May 1944. When Gandhi was released from prison, he found that the political situation in India had changed significantly. The Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, was demanding the creation of a separate country called Pakistan for India's Muslim population. This demand for partition deeply troubled Gandhi, who had always believed that Hindus and Muslims could live together peacefully in a united India. Gandhi spent his final years trying to prevent the partition of India and to promote harmony between different religious communities. He traveled extensively, speaking to both Hindu and Muslim audiences and pleading with them to reject hatred and violence. However, the political momentum toward partition had become too strong to stop, and Gandhi's efforts to maintain unity were ultimately unsuccessful. Independence and partition. On August 15, 1947, India finally achieved the independence that Gandhi had worked for throughout his adult life. However, the joy of independence was mixed with the tragedy of partition, as the country was divided into two separate nations, India and Pakistan. This division led to massive displacement of populations and terrible violence between different religious communities. Gandhi was heartbroken by the partition of India. He had spent his entire career fighting for a united, secular India, where people of all religions could live together in peace and equality. The creation of Pakistan based on religious identity went against everything he had believed and worked for. He called partition a tragedy and worried that it would lead to ongoing conflict between the two new nations. The partition of India resulted in one of the largest migrations in human history, as millions of Hindus and Sikhs moved from Pakistan to India, while millions of Muslims moved from India to Pakistan. During this migration, terrible violence broke out between different communities. Trains carrying refugees were attacked, villages were burned, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed. Gandhi was deeply troubled by the violence that accompanied partition. At the age of 78, when most people would be resting in retirement, he traveled to areas where violence was occurring and tried to restore peace between different communities. He met with leaders from all religions and pleaded with them to stop the killing and to protect innocent people regardless of their faith. In Delhi, the capital of newly independent India, Gandhi began a fast to protest the violence and to demand that the government ensure the safety of all citizens, including Muslims who had chosen to remain in India. His fast put enormous pressure on political leaders and helped to reduce the violence in the capital city. However, some Hindu extremists were angry with Gandhi for protecting Muslims and accused him of favoring Pakistan over India. Gandhi's efforts to promote peace between Hindus and Muslims made him enemies among some extremist groups who wanted India to be a purely Hindu nation. These groups saw Gandhi's message of religious tolerance and his protection of Muslim citizens as a betrayal of Hindu interests. They began to plot against Gandhi, seeing him as an obstacle to their vision of a Hindu-dominated India. On January 30, 1948, just 5.5 months after India's independence, Gandhi was walking to his daily prayer meeting in New Delhi when he was shot and killed by Nathuram Godse, a Hindu nationalist who opposed Gandhi's policies of religious tolerance. Gandhi's last words were Ram, Ram, the name of God in the Hindu tradition, showing that he died with thoughts of peace and spirituality in his mind. Gandhi's assassination shocked the world and plunged India into mourning. Millions of people attended his funeral, and leaders from around the world paid tribute to his life and work. The man who had led India to independence through non-violent means had himself become a victim of the violence he had spent his life trying to prevent. The assassination of Gandhi was particularly tragic because it occurred just as he was beginning to focus on the constructive work he wanted to do in independent India. He had planned to work on eliminating poverty, improving education, promoting women's rights, and ending discrimination against people from lower castes. His death deprived India of his guidance during the crucial early years of independence. Legacy of truth and nonviolence. Mahatma Gandhi's death was mourned around the world, but his ideas and methods continued to inspire people long after his assassination. His philosophy of satyagraha, or nonviolent resistance, became a model for social movements in many countries. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States, Nelson Mandela in South Africa, and countless others drew inspiration from Gandhi's example. Gandhi's most important contribution to the world was his demonstration that significant social and political change could be achieved without violence. Before Gandhi, most people believed that oppressed groups had no choice but to use violence to fight against their oppressors. Gandhi proved that truth, courage, and moral force could be more powerful than guns and armies. The principles that guided Gandhi's life continue to be relevant today. His emphasis on truth means that people fighting for justice must be honest about their goals and methods, and they must be willing to admit their mistakes. His commitment to nonviolence means that social movements should never use methods that harm innocent people, even when fighting against great injustices. Gandhi's idea of self-reliance, or Swadeshi, has influenced thinking about economic development and globalization. He believed that communities should be able to meet their basic needs through their own efforts, and should not become overly dependent on distant markets or foreign powers. This idea has inspired movements for local self-sufficiency and sustainable development around the world. Gandhi's personal example of simple living has also continued to inspire people who are concerned about materialism and environmental destruction. He showed that happiness and fulfillment do not depend on accumulating wealth or possessions, but on living according to one's values and serving others. His lifestyle of voluntary simplicity offers an alternative to the consumer culture that dominates much of the modern world. Perhaps most importantly, Gandhi demonstrated the power of individual conscience and moral courage. He showed that one person who is willing to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult or dangerous, can inspire millions of others to work for positive change. His life proves that ordinary people have the power to transform their societies if they are willing to make the necessary sacrifices. Gandhi's influence on the world extends far beyond politics and social movements. His ideas about education emphasized the development of character and practical skills rather than just academic knowledge. His thoughts about religion stressed the common values shared by all faiths rather than the differences that divide them. His approach to conflict resolution focused on understanding different perspectives and finding solutions that address everyone's legitimate needs. Today, Gandhi is remembered not just as the leader who helped India gain independence, but as one of history's greatest teachers about human dignity, moral courage, and the possibilities for positive change. His birthday, October 2, is celebrated as the International Day of Nonviolence by the United Nations, recognizing his contribution to peace and justice around the world. The title Mahatma, which means great soul, was given to Gandhi by the Indian people because they recognized his extraordinary moral character and his dedication to serving others. This title captures the essence of Gandhi's legacy. He was great not because of his political power or wealth, but because of his unwavering commitment to truth, nonviolence, and the welfare of all people. Gandhi's life teaches us that real change begins with changing ourselves. He believed that we cannot create a better world through hatred, violence, or selfishness. Instead, we must become the change we want to see in the world by practicing the values of truth, compassion, and service in our daily lives. This message remains as relevant today as it was during Gandhi's lifetime, inspiring new generations of people to work for justice and peace through nonviolent means.